It's closer. There we go.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, October 18th regular meeting of the Novi Community School District Board of Education. We welcome you all here. I would appreciate a roll call vote, Mr. Mena.
Trustee Cook. Here. Trustee Hood.
Here.
Trustee Mena here. Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee O'Connor.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Stevenson.
Here. Terrific, thank you. If you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
The move by Mr. Cook. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mrs. Stevenson. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Motion carries 7-0. First item on our real meat of our agenda is the awards, recognitions, and presentations. Dr. Matthews, I turn to you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. We're very excited this evening to be able to recognize one of our own. And Easter Seals Norb Promo, the Chief Development Officer, is here with us this evening to recognize Coach Jeff Burnside and the Novi Community School District for their support of our families. Coach Burnside and his Novi football team formed a partnership with Easter Seals and developed a sports camp program that has supported the special needs kids and young adults who attend the camp. And tonight, Easter Seals would like to express their deep appreciation to everyone who supports not only these children and young adults, but also our district each and every day. Mr. Promo, we invite you to the podium.
Thank you, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today. We're here for the awards presentation, but I also wanted to take just a few minutes to tell you all about Easter Seals and what we do and how this football program fits into our daily activities. So Easter Seals has been in existence for nearly 100 years. Many people are familiar with our name, but not necessarily do they know what it is that we do. And of course, we've been about disabilities ever since our existence. Years ago when we first started, the focus was on children with physical disabilities, and it was really an advocacy organization. But over the years, the world changed. Kids didn't even leave the house when they were in a wheelchair or had some other disability before they were hidden away. And Easter Seals was about breaking stigma and getting them out in the public and letting them live a full life. Those children grew up, they got married and had children, and the world changed, and Easter Seals continued to change. And across the country, there are many different Easter Seals organizations. We're all loosely put together under an umbrella, but in Michigan, we focus primarily on mental health, as well as developmental disabilities and also then kids with physical disabilities. So our mission statement is actually to change the world the way the world views disabilities by making differences, profound positive differences in people's lives. We have 11 locations throughout the state, and we are a statewide organization. Last year we served nearly 12,000 people. Easter Seals is known as an organization that serves children. We actually serve more adults now than children. Last year it was about 60% adults and about 40% children. And we do have a history of care and of developing new trends and taking on new horizons. Years ago in the 1930s, we began offering occupational therapy, which was considered not a standard of care at the time. And today we're still doing med rehab, and it's offered all over the place. For children, we have autism programs, we have behavioral health services, psychiatric services, med rehab, as I mentioned, therapeutic camp experiences, crisis intervention, and also trauma assessments. And when I say trauma, I'm talking about emotional trauma. Kids that face hunger every day, that don't have two parents in a house, that maybe witnessed death. There's many things that could be causing trouble, sometimes also abuse or other domestic violence in the house. And then, of course, we have our Easter Seals Miracle League program that I'll talk about in a second. I also want to mention that we are always looking for ways to partner with schools. And we've recently, when there's funding available, put a program in where we have therapists now on site offering actual therapy in Holly schools, in Waterford, and in Pontiac. So if there's ever a desire to implement that sort of program in Novi, we'd certainly be open to the conversation and trying to make it work. On the adult side, we're also doing then case management and treatments and therapies for behavioral health, for substance use, and we have a lot of group therapies. We have programs for military and veterans, and we also have a really unique program that most people have never heard about. You know, the number 2 industry in the state of Michigan is agriculture, and we have a program called Michigan Agribility that we run out of Grand Rapids that serves farmers statewide that become disabled through illness or injury in order for them to continue to work on the farm and continue to be productive. So it might be a lift, it might be special hand controls to use farming equipment, it might be a sidewalk between a house and a barn so that they can use a cart or a scooter to get where they need to go. And last year we served almost 200 farmers throughout the state, all the way up into the Upper Peninsula. And then we also have programs for senior citizens, so we have resources for them. We have independent living to keep kids in the house, and we do behavioral health services for seniors as well. I love this picture in the upper left. It's a baseball program that we had actually taken in the 1950s in Grand Rapids. And the history continues today with our Miracle League programs. We have a field in Southfield, and it is a fully adaptive field. It's a rubberized surface, and it accommodates wheelchairs, walkers, any type of equipment. And the kids get to play on a league in an organized sport, which anybody that has families with disabilities knows they don't get that opportunity. And that's what Miracle League affords them. Last year we had 400 kids play in the program. We expanded it to bowling that is done during the winter, and we also have a dance program, and we've also added yoga. So we're always looking for new activities for kids to be active. And we're in the process of getting our final funding together for our second Miracle League field, which will be in North Oakland County in Clarkston. And we're full in Southfield, so we're hoping that half the people in Southfield move up to the northern area and open up more spots in Southfield. So we're looking forward to having that open next year. That brings us to Novi Wildcats and Novi High School. We always wanted to add football to the Miracle League baseball program, and it was just not an easy thing for us to put together. And I think at the same time, Coach Burnside had the idea that he wanted to do something as well. And because Carrie and Dunn, whose children go to Novi schools and has been very active and lives in the area, knew Deb Heil and knew Jeff, they kind of put their heads together and came up with this football camp. We've now done it for 3 years. We've had several hundred kids participate in the program. And, you know, there are a lot of sports programs for kids with disabilities. But most of them are separate. They do their own thing, and they're doing it on the side in their own place. And the Miracle League, as well as Easter Seals, is all about inclusion and having people get to know each other, having them do things together. And so when the kids play baseball, they play with a buddy, a fully capable buddy that helps them run, helps them catch, helps them hit the bat. We had a blind girl whose dream was to hit the ball by herself. And they practiced, they counted out, 1, 2, 3, swing, 1, 2, 3, swing. They did it about 25 times with a buddy, and she hit the ball, and she got to first base, which is what they wanted. And the games are no rules. Everybody hits, everybody scores, everybody runs the bases, and they all have fun. Same concept with the football program, and Coach Burnside wanted the opportunity for the football players to interact and get to know kids with disabilities, how to deal with them, how to deal with families. and how to make them their friends. And I think that's the gist of what this program is really all about. And so because the program has been so successful, we decided that he definitely deserved our Community Involvement Award. We have been doing this for a number of years, and we chose him because, plain and simple, he deserves it. So the actual language on the award is that we award it to extraordinary people that make a positive difference in our community. And thank you for your support of our work to change the way the world defines and views disabilities by making profound positive differences in people's lives. And we're stronger together. So, Coach Burnside, congratulations. Thank
Well, thank you. I want to thank, Deb and Carrie as well. That, this really started for me just as a way to get our football kids a chance to learn how to give back and to realize there's a lot more than just playing football and being an athlete. They can be a lot more powerful, hopefully make an impact in life. And I feel like we've done some pretty cool things, and I know we've given our kids some really good experiences over the last couple of years. I'm hoping that it will pay off not only in the next couple of years, but 20, 30 years down the road when these our young people become young men and eventually fathers and husbands, and hopefully that will continue on. So I really don't have a lot of words. I already cried like 2 weeks ago, so I'm trying to keep it together again tonight. So I appreciate everything. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for all you do.
You might want to stay there, Coach Burnside, in case anybody up here would like to express appreciation for you.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Bennett.
well, I do. I've known Mr. Burnside, and I've worked with him for 13 of the last 15 years. And for him, it's never been about wins and losses. It's always been about the kids. He'd do this whether or not he'd be recognized or not. I've seen him do a lot of great things over the years. Sure, Mr. Heil back there probably enjoys all the time he gets to spend on the sideline helping you out as well. But thank you for what you do. It's just a fantastic thing you do for our district. I really appreciate it.
Other board members?
I was just going to say, that even though it's not all about wins and losses, there's not going to be a problem tomorrow night with Stevenson, correct?
I'm doing everything I can to get one more for this.
There you go.
I'm doing everything I can.
There you go.
Fantastic. Mrs. Hood?
I just wanted to add, my brother-in-law teaches English at a university in Tokyo, and when we were in the news for our football game, Mike called my husband and said, "Isn't this your high school?" And he was alerted to it from one of his students. So I think it is modeling this behavior or this inclusion for kids really worldwide is really wonderful. So, and you deserve it, and thank you for what you do.
And I wanted to mention too that another great aspect of this entire thing is that the football team comes out and buddies it for baseball every year in June as well. And so they're really seeing both sides and seeing what the kids do there in Southfield as well, and that's really important. And we appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mr. Cook?
Yeah, Coach Burnside, we really appreciate all you do and what you try to do with these boys. We've seen them in the schools, not just with the special needs kids, but, with all the kids. And you've turned football into almost a year-round activity for them because of all you have them doing and trying to teach them and getting them to be modeled citizens. And for that, we really appreciate your service to this district and the community.
I do notice a few people that came to support you. Would you like to recognize your supporters out there?
Well, obviously, we know Mr. Robbie Heil.
Yes.
He's Mr. Famous. Coach Mike Betts, Mr. and Mrs. Heil, and Jamie Young, Gabe Young. Which they're all a part of the football family, and we try to preach that we're all in this together. This is not about me. It never has been, never will be. So.
Well, we do thank you for representing Novi so well, and certainly a well-deserved reward. I know that it's one of the highlights, I think, for a lot of people in the community when they go back then every year after that, because it's just such a neat event to be at and to even just watch. I wouldn't participate in it, obviously, but even just watching it, it's very uplifting and really encouraging, especially in this day and age. We need more of that. So thank you very much, Mr. Burnside, for representing Novi and just being an exemplary Wildcat, and certainly an award that's well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beat Northville 1-0.
We just got an update on the soccer game that they won 1-0, so we're excited about that too. Thank you so much for being here from Easter Seals and for sharing about the organization. Did you?
It's our pleasure.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Was Mr. Smith, did you raise your hand?
No, I was just
oh,
waving.
Oh, waving. Okay, sorry. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you again for being here. Thanks for joining us. All right. Next, I see everyone's clearing out. They don't want to hear the audit. Next on our agenda is our reports to the board. We have an annual district audit report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Annually, school districts are required to have a financial audit completed. On October 11, 2018, the Finance Committee of the Board of Education met with the auditing firm of Plant Moran and reviewed the results of the audit for the year that ended June 30, 2018. They explained the audit process and reviewed the audit documents. Attached to your report are draft documents that were reviewed with the Finance Committee. They were the financial report letter, the federal grants report, and the presentation that will be given to the Board of Education tonight. And tonight, Chris Geck from Plant Moran will present the results of the audit of the 2017-18 financial statements to the Board of Education. And we welcome Mr. Geck from Plant Moran tonight.
Thank you. Apologize if those were awesome pictures in the last presentation, so I do not have as exciting pictures in tonight's audit presentation, so I do apologize in advance for that. Tonight, as Dr. Matthews stated, I'm here to present the results of the audit for the year ended June 30, 2018. We'd like to thank the Finance Department, Ms. Jill Minnick and Deanna Wheeler and her whole team. We put them through a lot of hard work in terms of our audit requests. We're out here for a period of time in May doing our preliminary procedures and doing grants compliance testing at that time. We're then back for the first 2 weeks in September doing the bulk of our year-end audit procedures, so we keep them quite busy. And as a result, I'm happy to report to you that we do have a clean opinion that we're here to share with tonight's audit results. All that hard work and effort, it does go into a lot of deliverables that you received in your board packet tonight. So you should have 3 different documents, plus the board presentation, the PowerPoint, so I guess that would make it 4. The first one I'd like to cover is the report to the Board of Education. The first section of that letter is giving you a highlight and a touch point basis to the preliminary letter that was sent to you before the audit started. Then we told you how our procedures and the plan, scoping, timing of the audit was going to play out. And this letter, now that you have, lets you know that the audit did go according to plan. We did not have any significant issues or adjustments during the audit, and everything went smoothly during our audit procedures. One thing that is significant and that's unique on the letter this year, if you're looking at page 3 of the report to Board of Education, is it does talk about a new accounting standard that was adopted this year by the district, and then 2 very significant estimates that are in your financial statements. And this would apply to every school district in Michigan this year as well. So back in 2015, the district, like every district in Michigan, adopted GASB 68. And what that meant was that you put a very big liability on your full accrual set of financial statements related to the underfunded position of the pension portion of the MIPSR's plan. At June 30 of 2018, Novi's portion of that liability is $119 million, so a very significant liability. Again, this year, GASB 75, very similar standard to GASB 68, that required all districts to put the underfunded position of the retiree health care portion of that same plan on those full accrual set of financial statements. So in addition to that $119 million liability on those full accrual set of financial statements, there's a new number this year, $40 million, in terms of that liability. So quite a big number when you compare that to the $119 that's already on the financial statements. So I wanted to give you some perspective and let you know that is in your financial statements this year. And again, that's something that all districts in the state of Michigan had to adopt this year. The second letter that you have included in your packet is the schedule of federal awards. There's 3 report letters that are included in that packet. In summary, those state that we did not have any issues in performing our compliance testing as it relates to your federal programs. This year we tested the special education cluster. It's about half of what you receive here at Novi in terms of your federal dollars, so it's a very significant portion of what you get in federal funding. Like I said, we didn't have any issues in testing that grant testing, and everything is clean in those audit report letters. The third packet that you have is the financial statement report. That's the thickest packet there. That includes all of your funds that you have here in the financial statements at Novi, your full set of financial statement footnote disclosures, and quite a bit of other information that's required for school districts report at the end of the year. And that does get submitted to the MDE by November 1st, so everything's in line to have that submission completed by the state deadline. Tonight's presentation, we're going to hit on a few highlights of the numbers in the financial statements and focus primarily on the general fund, which is the primary operating fund of the school district. So again, just to touch base on some of the summary points, the district had an unmodified opinion, that's the technical term, in terms of the level of assurance that we had in our report letter. So it's the highest form of assurance that you can have on your financial statements, and it means that your statements are materially stated as is tonight. We didn't have any material weaknesses in internal controls, and we had no compliance issues in that audit testing. The district's considered a low-risk auditee in terms of the federal programs, and that's a result of clean audits you've had in the past. So it allows us to look at the federal programs from a different lens and not have to have that high-risk lens on when we're doing that testing. The first slide to look at a few of the numbers here is specific to the general fund, again, for the year ended June 30, 2018. On the first column, this is the final amended budget that was set before the end of the year. And in that budget, the plan was to have a expenditure number that was going to exceed revenues by approximately $624,000. As a result of the year-end close, the final adjustments being posted by the finance department, us coming out and performing the audit to verify those numbers, we can report tonight that the final numbers result in a change of fund balance, which is an increase of just over $1.4 million. So a positive number compared to what the planned budget was before the end of the year was closed. On this next slide, we're looking at revenue by funding sources. Apologize here, a little hard to see on the screen. So what we're seeing here is revenue in terms of the funding sources of where it's coming from. So you can see here in this slide that a very significant portion of the revenue in the general fund is coming from state-funded sources. So most of that's going to be from the foundation allowance that you receive, and all districts receive in the state of Michigan. The foundation allowance does come through as partially a component of local property tax revenues, and then also from state funding. And so you can see here that just over 61% of general fund revenues come through in state sources. Another significant portion, almost 37%, comes through primarily through property tax collections in the general fund. Looking at the next slide, we're focusing on total expenditures in the general fund. Those were just over $75.9 million for 2018. Really focusing here that the bulk of the area in terms of the function code level where the expenditures are spent are in the area of instructional support. So if you look at those two function codes together, you're at about 78% in terms of your general fund expenditures. So very significant chunk of those expenditures, those resources in the general fund are spent directly in instructional support. To kind of give some perspective in terms of how Novi would have their expenditures aligned in the general fund by the function code presentation compared to other districts in Oakland County, we do have some summary information that's pulled together. And this is based on data from fiscal 16-17, and that's because all the 2018 audit reports have not yet been submitted. So we're going to compare Novi to the averages for Oakland County compared to the 2016-17 fiscal year. So as you can see, we just talked about instructional support being a very big bulk of those expenditures. And you can see here that for last year, Novi would be on the higher end in terms of how it spends resources in the general fund in those two function codes. So that would be directly spending dollars in the classroom, and you'd be on the higher end compared to other districts in Oakland County. On the flip side, some of the directly instructional function codes, school administration, operations and maintenance, non-instructional support, when you look at how Novi spent dollars in the general fund based on those function codes compared to other districts in Oakland County, you'd be on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of how those dollars were spent. So just to give a little perspective in terms of the comparison there. On the next slide, we're still focused on expenditures. Again, just over $75.9 million in the general fund, but this time looking at it from a different lens. This is what's called the object code level of reporting. You can kind of think of function code as department, and then object code, well, how do we spend the dollars within those departments? So you can see here, salaries and benefits are going to be the very big majority of where those dollars are spent. So just over 85% is spent in the object code classification of salaries and benefits. Benefits is going to include healthcare premium contributions for your employees, employer payroll taxes, and you also a very significant portion of those fringe benefits are the district's contributions to that state-run MIPSRS program. So those big liabilities we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, the rate the district pays in, some of it's funded through specific state funding sources, but you're near 37-38% of every payroll dollar that's getting paid into that plan. So it's a very significant portion of those fringe benefits. The next slide is focusing on the history of the change in fund balance for the general fund from fiscal years 2011 through 2019. So again, the year ended 2018 saw an increase of fund balance of just over $1.4 million. The last 2 years also, you can see here from this graph, did result in an increase in fund balance. But as you can see, some of the years before that, there was decreases in fund balance. So we've had some up years and some down years when we look at the general fund in terms of revenues and expenditures and where fund balance has ended up. And then in terms of where the adopted budget is currently for fiscal 18-19, there'd be a planned use of fund balance of about $1.4 million to balance the budget for fiscal 18-19. On the next slide, we're focused again on fund balance in the general fund. And to give some perspective, again, for those same years, 2011 through 2019, and really comparing that to the measure, the board goal of maintaining at least a 10% level of fund balance as we look at that as a ratio of total general fund expenditures, and then seeing how we're doing compared to that goal. So you can see for 2018, that ratio, fund balance as a percent of general fund expenditures, was just over 15.4%, so about 5 percentage points above that 10% goal. The planned use of fund balance next year of about $1.4 million, that'll bring that number down to about 12.9%, so still above that 10% goal, but slightly lower than it was this year. A few other financial highlights for 2018. It was still a busy year this year in terms of capital outlay and construction programs. About $7.4 million was spent in the district this year in capital outlay. That includes your bond-funded capital projects funds and then your sinking fund as well. So quite a bit of activity going on there with technology and construction. Lastly, too, just wanted to point out, the district's done a great job of being able to do more with less. If you look back and look at funding of what districts had in Michigan, looking at fiscal year 2011, every district then took a $470 cut per pupil going into fiscal year 2012. If you look at your funding in terms of what Novi received for 2018, you're still $204 behind what you're receiving in 2011. So if you multiply that difference, that $204, by the number of pupils that you have in terms of how you get paid for state aid, there was just over 6,600 students. So that would equate to an additional $1.3 million that you would have had for fiscal 17-18 had that cut never happened, or had you been at least getting for this year what you were getting in fiscal year 2011. So it's quite a bit of difference, and you got to consider too the fact that you've had that difference or more all of the past years leading back to 2011 as well. So if you think back to that fund balance slide, definitely commend the district for being able to maintain fiscal responsibility as well as strong programs here at Novi, even though you've had a lot less funding in terms of state aid. Those are all the prepared comments I had for tonight. If there's any questions on any of the reports or the numbers, I'd be happy to take those.
Okay. Board members have questions? Very thorough presentation. Thank you for all that additional information. Mr. O'Connor.
There were, Ms. Minnick, there were 3 recommendations in the letter that talked about kind of tightening up our construction transactions, our segregation of duties when it came to super users in our financial system, and then lastly, some IT recommendations. Do you agree with those recommendations? Are we going to implement those?
Regarding the first comment about the construction expenditures, I believe the note is more so to point out that we had an independent auditor review those numbers because our Plant Mary and Cressa relationship with the construction side of things. So I believe that was more of just an affirmative comment. The comment about the segregation of duties and the super users of the financial system, we are still implementing our accounting and financial software package, as are most districts across the county. And when that happens, it's not unusual for a person to have super user access so that they can modify and continue to implement modules and go in and troubleshoot when things aren't working well. And so we've already begun to start to tailor user functions and be sure they are equivalent with what the needs are for their roles. But until we are fully implemented, our Director of Finance will continue to be a super user of the system. And regarding the IT recommendation, their recommendation is that the number of attempts to log in should be lengthened. And so I will talk with our IT staff on that and work toward improvement on that.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right. Other questions, Mr. Becker?
No question, just some observations that I had from looking at this material, which I don't know about you guys, but I can only look at that for so long. I go crazy. But I did notice a few things that that kind of stood out to me. One was that obviously we're a little bit off target on our budgeted expenditures versus actual. Yet our original budget was only off by $79K. So versus what we were ultimately off by. So that was sort of one observation that I had. So I don't know whether or not that's a question, but maybe offline, if somebody can kind of explain to me how that happens, then that would be great. I'm saying that I'm more of an IT guy. I'm not a financial guy per se, sure. But I was just curious about that. Another thing is, since we were off target on a few of the expenditure lines, I'm just wondering how that carries over now onto our new budget, which we already passed. I haven't really compared the two. How we adjusted for that? For example, there was a couple of expenditure lines where we were under budget. How did that affect the 2018-2019 budget?
So the 18-19 budget was adopted in June, and so we have not taken any action to amend that budget yet. A budget amendment will be coming forward to the board as it does every winter, and we will take into account any changes or modifications that need to be made, where we will also include changes for enrollment and other known changes, retirement rates, such things like that. But interestingly, the amount that we have added to the fund balance of $1.4 million is pretty much equivalent to the amount that we budgeted to tap into the fund balance. So as we saw in the presentation, the amount of fund balance we're adding was almost equivalent to the amount we were going to be using for 18-19. So okay. We will remain at a fund balance of about 12.9%.
Okay, and then the last thing, last observation that I had was, so we have, as far as instructional and instructional support expenditures, we're pretty much on the top end of Oakland County. We have added a number of administrators over the past few fiscal years, I believe. We've certainly added more square footage to our property and more students, yet our operation and maintenance budget still remains the lowest in the county. I'm kind of curious how that happens. Are we shortchanging our operation and maintenance area at this point, or?
Well, a couple of factors. One is that we are lean, and that's one reason we have added a second HVAC position that we're having trouble filling, but has been posted. And secondarily, our district is fortunate enough to have our voters approve a sinking fund millage, which allows us to transfer certain upgrades and maintenance facility type expenditures to that fund to relieve pressures on the general fund.
Good question. Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Mr. O'Connor?
Do we know, Ms. Minnick, I know it's early, but with this $159 million unfunded liability, all the school districts are going to get hit with their bond rating. And, you know, we have a potential bond coming in the next couple of years. Do you know how hard we're going to get hit on that?
I don't. I cannot predict that at this time, but it was a topic at the most recent county-wide school business managers meeting, and we do know that
It's not a Novi problem. It's across.
That's correct. And it was a discussion topic because some school districts have seen a reduction in their bond credit rating. And we need to keep in mind that this liability is not a liability that we can control. We don't have any option of what we contribute to the retirement system and so forth. But we have seen credit ratings decline because of it.
We're just going to have to be careful if we do decide to go to the voters, how we manage that versus our millage rate. Because we may not have the capability to borrow as much as we want if our bond rate goes lower.
Perhaps. I would imagine that there would still be buyers for those tax-free bonds that we would issue, yet the interest rates may be higher, and so a greater portion of our tax levy would go toward those interest costs.
Good questions. Other questions? For Chris or for Ms. Minnick? Mr. Cook?
I just want to thank Chris and Laura for their work they've done in getting this all prepared and the time that their people have spent in here. And also Deanna, she does an outstanding job in making sure that everything is followed to the letter and making sure that the auditors have access to everything they need. So really want to thank her, Ms. Minnick, Chris, Laura, and everybody that was involved in this because, I've only been on the board for 4 years, but every year it's come out clean with no adjustments or anything. So we've been very fortunate. So.
Thank you. And thank you to the Finance Committee as well for reviewing it in depth and going over it on a different occasion so that we could bring it before the board tonight with confidence. So thank you for that, Mr. Cook, as well. Other comments or questions? No, thank you very much for your work, for the questions, and it is always fantastic to come up with a clean audit, and we thank you for that. I know it's the hard work of your department.
I'd like to second Treasurer Cook's comments about Deanna Wheeler. She puts in a lot of time and effort to prepare for the audit, so I appreciate that, and the business office team as a whole. And it's a pleasure to work with Plant Moran.
I've heard her name mentioned quite a few times. I tell you, in all honesty, and I almost hate saying this, but she could walk right by me. I wouldn't know who she is. So maybe I'll have to pay a visit sometime.
Isn't that the type of employee you want? One
I
that
guess,
does an outstanding job.
Yeah.
And,
You never see her, never, yeah.
She attended the Finance Committee meeting to entertain questions of the Finance Committee and to present the work of the audit.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for being
Great,
here.
thank you.
We appreciate the thorough and very well explained report for those of us who are either IT or social workers or whatever else.
Financially challenged.
Financially challenged.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is our first opportunity for comments from the audience related to agenda items. This will be the first opportunity for anyone in our audience to approach the podium and share their thoughts on agenda items. We would ask that you fill out a green card in the back and that you would limit your comments to 5 minutes. Seeing no one approach the podium, we will move on to our consent items. We have 3 items on our consent agenda: the regular meeting minutes, approval of the bills, and approval of the 5th grade field trip. I would entertain a motion. Mr. Mena?
Motion to approve consent items A through C as presented.
Support.
Been moved by Mr. Mena and supported by
You call it.
Good.
Mrs. Stevenson. Is there any additional, normally we don't, on consent items, the 5th grade camp is the annual field trip. I think we're all pretty familiar with that at this point. If there's nothing additional, I will call the question. All those in favor of accepting the consent items as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next is our action items. Our first action item is a personnel recommendations. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and I will turn to Dr. Kinzer.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. This evening we have 2 new hires to recommend. First is Ali Jaffer, physical education teacher at Novi High School, And also Mary Lehman, special education parapro at Village Oaks Elementary School.
I will entertain a motion. Mrs. Hood.
I move that the school board adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Been moved by Mrs. Hood, supported by Mr. Mena. Is there any discussion on the two items? No? Mr. Cook?
The high school PE teacher was a late add to this, it looked like.
So we had a high school physical education teacher accepted a new position at Village Oaks Elementary School to teach PE there, creating the vacancy at high school.
And just, but I didn't see it on the report earlier this week, and then
Just
We were waiting on making sure all the prints got through. So.
Does that affect our officiating class at all that we have? I mean, or any other classes like that?
I don't believe so.
taught? So.
This person will step right into her role.
Okay.
Mr. Schmidt.
So I was aware of the opening of the PE position at Village Oaks, so that person swapped. Are we now full at 652? Or are we still,
We are fully staffed.
or 452? Teachers?
Oh, 452, correct.
Okay. Fully staffed if we approve this. All right. Fantastic. Thank you. I think it's been moved and supported. I will call the question. All in favor of accepting the personnel recommendations as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion, those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Fully staffed. Congratulations, Dr. Kinzer. That's fantastic.
I might add that this is an ongoing discussion point among county superintendents about how many districts have openings throughout the course of the year. And we're in a very fortunate position to be fully staffed. There are many districts in the county and also throughout the state that we're still wrestling to find teachers. So.
Yes, so thanks for all your work in your department as well. Next is our winter tax levy, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy, and I will turn to Ms. Minnick to summarize this. We discussed this earlier at a meeting in October, but I will turn to Ms. Minnick to summarize.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Matthews. At the June 14th regular board meeting, the Novi Board of Education formally certified the 18-19 tax levies. And at the November 16th, 2017 board meeting, nearly a year ago, the Board of Education resolved to levy 50% of the taxes in the winter and 50% of the taxes in the summer. Therefore, the 2018 winter tax levy is 50% of the originally adopted tax levy. And the recommendation is that the Board of Education, in the best interest of the school district, authorize the winter tax levy as listed in your board packet.
All right. I would entertain a motion. Mr. Cook?
Recommend the Novi Community School District Board of Education in the best interest of the school district authorize the winter December 2018 tax levy as listed above.
Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Stevenson. Is there any additional questions on this? I just have a quick comment. So in November, at a meeting in November, will we then have to pass another resolution for the next year?
Yes, well, yes, for the summer tax
That's okay.
levy,
Okay.
and that will be coming forward in November.
In November, okay. All right, I'll be looking forward to that. All right, I will call the question if there's no additional discussion. All those in favor of accepting our winter tax levy as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next are our superintendent goals. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The superintendent and the Board of Education have agreed upon the superintendent goals for the 2018-19 school year. These goals were thoroughly discussed during a number of board work sessions and came before the board for information and discussion at a regular meeting of the board on September 6th and a regular meeting of the board on September 27th. The superintendent goals for 2018-19 come to the board tonight for formal approval. These have been thoroughly discussed with the administrative team, both the cabinet and the administrative council, which is all administrators in the district. And so they come to you tonight for final approval so that we can continue to move forward with these goals. And then if approved tonight, I will come back to the board on a regular basis throughout the course of the year, updating the board on progress on these goals.
Fantastic. All right, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the superintendent goals as presented.
Is there support?
I support.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Stevenson and supported by Mr. Smith. Is there questions about our superintendent goals? Mr. O'Connor?
So I have to chuckle for a minute here because the superintendent goals, while we've worked very hard on those, we've gone now back with district goal number 3 to go. We've gone back to our original way we were going to measure the fund balance. And, you know, these are good goals. This is a good step in the right direction. We've all worked very hard in a collaborative effort. So I'm not going to let this one measurement, you know, stop my support for this. But I got to tell you, I have to chuckle because the way the structure was set up when we talked about an alternative way, Dr. Matthews would get a 1 point given the audit report that we just got, where under this new system, he would get a 4. Now, I don't really care about the 1 or 4. You and I talked about this earlier. My concern is that we're supposed to be managing as a school district under a 10% goal. And it's really frustrating for me when I see things like, you know, now we're at 15% fund balance, that we went through a lot of budget development over the last, you know, 3 or 4 months to create our budget, and there were a lot of things that were left off. You know, things like safety, safety resources. We talked a lot about robotics development, advanced manufacturing curriculum in middle school. We talked about the need for additional counselors. We talked about there was a wish list of a lot of things that we ended up having to cut back. You know, even at last week's meeting, or 2 weeks ago at the meeting, clearly we have mental health issues, and we're not doing anything about them. I mean, we're doing activities, but, you know, if we've got these additional dollars, I think we should take those dollars, and I'd like to see administration put together plans, whether it be for, you know, advanced manufacturing curriculum, you know, resources to help us with the mental health issues. You know, the objective of the 10% fund balance is to put the money back in the classroom. And I just feel like if we're managing our fund balance properly, we're doing a disservice to the community when we're not putting that money back into the classroom. And I think we should, you know, begin our budget development process now. We've got the dollars. Mm-hmm. Let's do it, and let's start putting together, you know, bring us back some recommendations, and let's start putting that money in the classrooms to help address some of these issues.
And with you know, the audit identifying the increase in fund balance, we can begin to have those discussions now that we know what our financial position is. And certainly, as we go through the school year, if appropriate and when appropriate, we can bring forth budget amendments to the board so that we can move forward on some of those issues that you discussed. And you and I have had that conversation.
Well, I think additionally that the strategic planning that you're talking about might identify areas in the community that the community thinks are important that maybe we haven't even discovered yet. I mean, I'm certain that maybe the robotics will come up, and mental health, and some other challenges. I will say, I do think, like, we did add a resource officer. There are a few things that we did around some of those issues that was helpful. Could we have possibly done more? Possibly.
Quite a bit more, but we didn't know we had the money.
So,
yep.
All right, so we've had a motion and supported. Is there additional comments or questions about the goals? Yes, Mr. Cole.
Yeah, we've hashed these out and rehashed them, hashed them again. And, you know, we've gone over these a lot, and I just want to say it's my belief that, you know, when Dr. Matthews or any superintendent does their job, they're being effective. When they're going above and beyond that, that's when they're being highly effective. And the rubrics here are kind of a mix. Some of them are, you know, that's effective is doing his job, and a lot of them are highly effective, he's doing his job. So I just wanted to say that's the one thing that, you know, I'm probably going to still push on, but, you know, it's not going to hold up this, because I do believe we have some very good district goals in here, district objectives. It's just the rating system, the way it is just my heartburn.
I would concur that, but I would also provide some historical context that these are a lot better than they used to be.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
We're working in the right direction. Mr. Mena.
And just to add it, and just to echo what Mr. Cook said, so expect maybe a little bit more a tougher conversation around how we measure some of these, not how we measure it, but how we rate those going forward.
All right. Well, if there is no additional discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of accepting the superintendent goals as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next is our second opportunity for comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for comments about anything in the board's jurisdiction. If there is anyone in our audience that would like to speak this evening to the board, you could fill out a green card and hand it to Mrs. Holly. People are shaking their heads, so I don't believe there is anyone who would like to address the board this evening. Seeing none, we will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. This week, our Meadows 5th grade and Novi Middle School 8th grade parents both participated in information sessions, one for 5th grade camp and the other for the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. These opportunities provided by the Novi Community School District and with the support of our parents and our Novi Community School District staff continue to provide wonderful opportunities for our students to learn outside of the school day and outside of the classroom. Ms. Murphy and I will serve as chaperones as we go on the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C., and we're looking forward to sharing this experience with our 8th grade students. The Novi Athletic Booster Craft Show is Saturday, October 27th, and all are invited to attend and to purchase freely at that event. And then the Novi High School Fall Play is being performed this week. The play chosen for this year's performance is 26 Pebbles, which tells the story of the aftermath and effects of on the community after the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut, back in 2012. Performances will take place at 7 p.m. Thursday tonight through Saturday, October 18th through the 20th in the high school's Black Box Theater at Novi High School, and I would encourage all to attend this meaningful play at Novi High School. And that's my report this evening, Ms. Murphy.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Next are administrative reports.
Do we have a, I know I ask every week, but I'm just curious about the student growth model. I know that you've reported to us in the Friday updates a couple times, but where are we at? I mean, I know it's difficult to put it together, but are we going to have alignment with teachers and you for student growth model?
Certainly, we can provide an update on exactly what the formula looks like to the board, and so I'll do that.
Will it be like similar to like we had last year, or is this something?
Yep, very similar.
So those kinds of measurements?
Yes.
Okay. That's a big part of the evaluation tool. I just want to make sure that we're.
Yep, we've I think reached agreement on that, and so I can certainly provide the board with that information.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Minnick, do you have additional reporting?
I do, just two things. Thank you. At a previous meeting, I mentioned that we were going to commence a traffic study around the traffic and pedestrian patterns around the high school, and that got underway this week. And when those results have been reported, I will report out to the board on those. And secondly, the Japanese school is having an open house on Saturday to invite our teachers who are involved with the education of our Japanese students so that they can observe classrooms, and become more familiar with the traditions and cultures of Japanese students.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Dr. Kinzer.
Thank you. Our second Mentee Monday of the year was this past Monday, and we focused on the classroom observation portion of our teacher evaluation process. In our first session, which is our 7th through 12th grade first-year teachers in the district, Ann Combe and Kate Castle, a German and social studies teacher at Novi Middle School, presented. And then in the second session, which is our K-6 group, Jen Nikos and Megan Ballo-Buford presented, and both sessions were outstanding. Our next Mentee Monday is December 3rd.
Fantastic. Thanks. Great way to welcome and just prepare our teachers in the district. Fantastic. And Dr. Weber.
Certainly. Last week we had a coffee with the superintendent where we featured our K-12 approach to STEM education. About Dr. Metz with 25 folks there, pretty much standing room only, I think. Where parents engaged in coding. We actually taught parents who knew nothing about coding how to code, and that's thanks to Gianna Morozic, Wanda Ciancio, and Jeff Maas, who assisted us with that. Really lively conversation around that. Also, we're able to share and showcase what we're doing from a K-12 perspective. In the same vein, this week had the good fortune of meeting with Noman Hussein from Kama, which is a $1.6 billion a year company. You may recognize Kamau from their work with our career prep as well as on Grand River, their robotics company. We had a conversation around a robotics program that they have that would actually provide our students with a robotics, internationally recognized robotics license, and that could start in 6th grade. I'll be following up with him for further conversation. It makes a perfect marriage in the sense that one of the very first companies 9 years ago that I visited here in Novi was Kamau. We've built and cultivated that relationship. They've been a great partner thanks to Bob Stee and Linda Shinfera, who have kept that consistent relationship going. We would be the first school district in the state of Michigan and perhaps the country, because it's based in Europe right now, to bring this full-scale robotics program and curriculum in the Novi Community School District. So more on that to come. Today, Jared Vanscoter, who is from Autodesk, a $2 billion a year company in revenue, also has presence here in Novi. He and I toured the high school. We met with Kristen Franchi, Phil Scavo, a couple students who actually used the CAD software that Autodesk provides, and building a relationship with them to have more of a presence in our schools as well. And then yesterday, 2 representatives from Macy's, which is a $25.78 billion in revenue a year company, came and critiqued our incubator first pitch. I'm happy to say that 2 products from our incubator class already, and gosh, what is it, October 18th, have been accepted to be sold at Macy's in February, with that revenue going back to the incubator program. They were stunned by how amazing our kids were in every absolute aspect of it, and absolutely delighted with our kids and our teachers and the opportunities that they have. So just a little bit of an update around what we're doing and what we've been up to around STEM, robotics, and so on. On a more sobering note, I will say I attended Wayne Robles' viewing today at Sullivan Funeral Home. Wayne was a city councilman. I got to know Wayne as a Rotarian. Wayne was the president of Rotary about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and I found Wayne to be an exceptionally committed person to our community and to the underdog. And Wayne was one of those guys that it's a big, physically a big guy, but just gentle and quiet. And one of the things I really deeply appreciated about Wayne is no matter how much we may have differed on certain subjects, the conversation was always civil and lively and fun, and he will be missed in this community. Thank you.
The funeral mass is at 10:30 tomorrow morning at Holy Family Catholic Church.
Yeah, very sad news for our community. All right, next is our board communication. Do I have board members that have things to communicate? Mr. Cook?
In line with Dr. Weber's report, with the partnership with Kamau that you're developing, is that with an industrial robot into our facility, or are kids going over their facility, or?
No, so what this is really, Mr. Cook, is terribly exciting in the sense that the idea of an international certificate going to each of our kids, right? But actually bringing robots into the schools, and the robot that we were looking at that we would bring in is about a 3 pivot point robot that you would see at any manufacturing facility that's using robotics. And really the thing that Kamau has done that I think is amazing, and they've developed this over the last 6 years, is they recognize the talent shortage that we're facing. So Kamau took the bull by the horns, and actually for the past 6 years has been developing not only a K-12 approach, but they are actually going out and providing master's level programming for graduates to get into that piece of it, and providing them pieces on supply chain and project management and so on. So our kids would not be leaving, if this pans out, would not be leaving the district. Instead, we would have, in my mind, a room with about 5 of these robots, so about 5 kids around each one, and a full curriculum there. But next week I've got about a 3 to 4 hour meeting with them to really kick the tires on it and see where it is. It would be terribly exciting, again, the relationship that Bob and Linda have built.
Yep. Along those lines, though, there's also the Waymo and Uber. They're desperately seeking people that can automate their vehicles. And partnership with them, with our kids, and some of the thinking that our kids have would probably go a long way with those guys and local.
Right over on Beck Road there with Waymo, right?
Yep. So I thought of that one day when I pulled off the expressway at Novi Road, and within the stoplight, there were 4 Waymo cars drive by, so.
It's a interesting feeling, isn't it? Like when you see that.
Of course, there were still people in the driver's seat,
But they weren't touching the wheel. So on that point, Mr. Cook, imagine if we built a relationship with Waymo, and then OTEC does such a wonderful job when it comes to the automotive end of things. And somehow, no matter what, these vehicles are going to need to be serviced, right? They might be able to drive themselves, but they're going to need to be serviced somewhere, somehow. So do we cultivate and do we build that ecosystem as well in our area? Why not?
Great
Yeah.
thoughts. Great thoughts. Do you have additional board communication? No? Other board members? Mr. O'Connor?
The Oakland County School Boards Association had its bi-monthly meeting and dinner last night, and there was a presentation on cybersecurity, and I've given the PowerPoint presentation to Ms. Holly to put in our board book resources. The Oakland ISD also issued their annual report with a survey, so that'll also be in the resource book for in board books. On November 17th, Saturday, there will be a 4.5-hour workshop sponsored by the Oakland County School Boards Association on safety and security issues. A company called New Dawn Security is going to be presenting, and we're opening it up to all school districts in the Tri-County area. So that'll be November 17th between 10 and 2:30.
Okay. Other board members? Well, I'll just say last night I was at the middle school for the PTO meeting. They have a very enthusiastic group of parents over there, which is really awesome to see, that are supporting different projects over there, but also the 8th grade field trip. There were 95% of the parents actually managed to get there for the meeting, which I think has got to be a record. So kudos to Kenny Fenchel for just constantly, getting the word out in the organization that he does. It was all, I think, relatively smooth. Seemed like everything went fairly well. And I also attended, after our last board meeting, where Mr. Cook mentioned about the student voice. We were talking about our policy, and you mentioned the student board representative. And the MASB had a session on student voice last Wednesday that I had my schedule cleared, and I registered and went. So I'll be giving this to Ms. Holly, too, to put in. But it's this is the toolkit that they're using at the MASB. It's a brand new about students on school boards. But there was also, the presenter was fantastic. He's written a lot of books. His name is Adam Fletcher. And he really talked about student voice, not just about students on school boards, but student voice and what that means and what that can mean in a district. And we talked about several ways that we've used student voice, whether it's with our professional development or some of the other aspects, but there's a lot of other ways to engage students and how we do that and what is right for our district, and there was a lot of discussion around that. And also then the legal, Brad Banasic presented the legal parts of what, if you have a student on your school board, and what does that mean legally, and what you can and can't do. So overall it was a really great day, really, really helpful. So I will get this information to Sheila, and certainly that's something that I think at some point in time the board probably can continue to have that discussion about what that means to us to have, whether we want to have a student on our school board. They did have a student from Dexter who's on their school board. They have 2 student representatives, always a junior and a senior. It's a 2-year commitment, and they have someone on our school board that actually does I believe he said he does what's it called, an advisory vote, which you can do on a school board, where if it's an issue that would be impacting the school, can ask them, well, would you like to give us an advisory vote? How would you vote on this? The board doesn't have to go along with it, obviously, but to ask the students how they felt about particular issues, which I thought was really kind of an interesting way to do it. But they've had 2 representatives on their school board for about the last 10 years. So there are school boards out there that are doing it successfully. Some of them, just have the report out, but a lot of them actually have representation where they're participating and even making motions and asking for things to be put on the agenda. So just some interesting things on student voice. So I will pass these along to Sheila so she can add them to our resource book as well. I think that is it. Any additional? When is the soccer game, the next game? Do we know? I should announce that. So the soccer team won. We don't know. They will have another game, though, maybe Tuesday of next week.
I don't know.
We will find it.
Let's find out. So send an email out to everyone. 'Cause they're hard to. It's hard to find on our website when it's the playoffs. Anyways, okay, fantastic. That concludes our meeting this evening, I believe, unless there's anything additional. All right, seeing no one, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been motioned by Mr. Smith and supported by Mr. O'Connor that we adjourn this evening. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for being with us.